Hello, I'm Dr. Ron England, and I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about databases. This is part two of a two-part series lecture. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at database management systems, some of the different database management systems, looking at kind of snapshots in time, some of the ways that companies use databases, some places that you get data from, and where you can get data from, internet databases, and some of the ways that you can get into this field through, breaking into professional training here. So let's first look at back at that concept of a database management system. If you've watched the previous lecture on databases, you kind of got an idea that what a database is. But when you get into a concept of a database management system, you not only have to be able to manipulate the data, which is store, modify, extract, but you also have to figure out how you're going to do this in a secure environment with multiple users, providing high levels of integrity, but still maintain a level of access to the data. And it's that database management system that provides all these pieces together. So let's go back in time a little bit. For some people that might be working now, maybe it isn't so far back in time, and look at something like the good old telnet sessions that you had with the mainframe databases. We used to call these things green screens. It's a textual-based interface. And in this case, we're looking at a TN3270 with a Z operating system. And this is how it works. This is a TN3270 emulator, which is basically a computer program that emulates a terminal. We'll look at some terminals here in a minute. So what did the mainframes look like? Well, this is an IBM 360 mainframe, actually directly from the IBM site. And as you can see, they're pretty big machines. They've got magnetic tape. They're relatively complex pieces of equipment that require a lot of operations and maintenance. And they were accessed through primarily these terminals, which we used to call them dumb terminals because that's all they did. All they do is display what the mainframe sends to them. They're essentially CRT monitors and keyboard input devices. Now, things have gotten a lot more complex since then. The mainframes still, by the way, exist. They haven't gone away, but there's now lots of different ways to access the databases. One of the environments for database access, which is called the client-server environment, which is pretty straightforward, where the client sends forth a query for information or a request for information to a server, and then the server responds back to the client. You do this all the time. This is browsing the web. The server may or may not have to go to a back-end database to get information. It may just pull it off the file system, but this is the primary architecture by which most people access the internet. Just you send information, you send a request to a server, and the server responds. So let's go a little bit one step more complex, and let's look at the databases that might be behind this. So let's talk a little bit about distributed database systems. Well, as of today, and as of to date of what I've taught you about, databases essentially existed as a single database on a single machine. But it's way more complex than that in the real database world. You have multiple databases that need to be accessed to put together information, and they may exist on multiple machines, and they may all be all the multiple machines may all be part of one, essentially what looks like one database. These are called distributed database systems, which makes up a huge chunk of what databases are out there today. And when you take a database and you break it up into multiple machines, there's a lot of different ways to organize it. So you may fragment the database vertically, which essentially means that different fields or columns exist in different databases. Even though it may look like one database, it's getting it from physically two different databases with the columns in different locations. Or you may have horizontal fragmentation, where you have a person record. If you search for a person who lives in North Carolina, it's going to go to one database. If you search for a person who lives in Florida, it might go to another database. But they essentially are accessed through one single interface. But they really are two different databases. So now, how do you use all this? Or who uses all this? Well, you do use databases all the time. But companies use databases to essentially make their operations more efficient or be able to operate in the world today. So things like inventory control systems, where you actually manage and keep track of your inventory. That is one type of database. The ERP, or Enterprise Resource Planning database, is essentially an all-encompassing database which tries to, in many cases, cover all the aspects of a business operation. But there's all sorts of different other pieces, like computer integrated manufacturing, where the computer itself takes plans right off a computer generated by a person and does the manufacturing from there. Or a very complex database system is the internet search systems, which has multiple servers, multiple databases, and an entire complex scheme by which these things operate. Now, getting data. Well, you create data. You fill out forms, you fill out surveys, you enter your name in places, and that's data. Direct user input is one of the primary sources of data. Another direct sources of data is automated. So when you pull information from things, and whenever you do a transaction somewhere where you buy something with a credit card or even not with a credit card, you're entering information into a database. People go out and actually get information that goes into databases, such as the Census Bureau goes out and runs a census and generates a tremendous amount of data that is input into the government computers, which you can then later access that information. But the Census Bureau is not the only group that goes out and does surveys. There's lots of groups that go out and do surveys. Now, you have access to a lot of this data, and a lot of this access you have directly over the internet. Sources like data.gov provide you with some really amazing access to very rich data sources. And this is a government supported. Local and state governments, federal government, all have databases that you do have access to. Another source for data is the Google Data Explorer. In Google Data Explorer, I'm going to go ahead and drop in an actual Google thing here, and this is the one that was shown in the slide. This is a plot of fertility versus life, a bubble plot of fertility versus life expectancy. The size of the bubbles themselves, each bubble represents a country, and the size of the bubble is the population of that country. And fertility goes up here, where life expectancy goes up to the right. And I'm going to actually, the beauty of the ones on Google is you can animate them. So I'm going to go ahead and animate this over time. And as you notice, there's a general trend that you can see here. Life expectancy is going up, and fertility rates are going down. Okay, that is, and that actually shouldn't run counterintuitive to what you know about history here. That a country like China, which has right here, there's India. We'll take India because I can actually easily get to it, which has a fertility rate of 2.59 and a life expectancy of 65.5. But if I run India back through time, if we go back to here, it had a fertility of 5.87, and this is 1960. This is not that long ago. It's maybe 50 years or so ago, but it's still not that long ago. 42.4 for the life expectancy and 5.77. But what does this provide you when you're looking at the data? Well, the data visualization tools like you have on the data exploring site gives you the ability to actually see what's going on. Whereas if you were just looking at the numbers of individual countries and trying to get an idea of what is happening in the world, look at that country right there. That's Bangladesh. Did you notice what Bangladesh did? So the effect of wars and things like that will actually be shown in a plot like this. Pretty amazing stuff. Okay, but that's the visualization tools. Now, suppose you want to get into the world of data. What I just did there is data analysis, and that is a field of working with data, a data analyst. And it's a very rich field. But we're going to talk mostly about fields where you specifically work with the databases themselves. So we'll look at two databases in particular, Oracle. And how do you break into the Oracle field? Well, getting an education in and actually the basics of how databases work and run is critical to this. But then once you get to the part where you're working with Oracle databases and you're working for a company that is an Oracle-based company, you can get certifications in each of these different to show that you have a high level of capability in working with Oracle. And Oracle has hundreds of different types of certifications. And they cover all the different aspects of Oracle. Oracle has Oracle University, which helps teach all these individual skills specifically with the database. Microsoft is another one. SQL Server has levels of certification, such as Associate, Solutions Expert, and Solutions Master, which you go from an Associate to an Expert to a Master level with many of the Microsoft certifications, and they follow this general scheme. So what I've attempted to show you in a nice 10 minutes is some of the richness of the field of databases. That database management systems run the gamut from the old mainframe, and don't make fun of the old mainframes. They're still out there and they're still being used. So they've got some serious longevity. to the more modern database management systems, to how these databases are used inside of actual companies, to where data, how does data get into databases and how do you get the data out of the databases, some databases that you have access to through just general internet access, and what can you look at as far as just your education in databases and the professional training to become an expert in the database field. Hopefully you found this interesting and useful. I love this field. It's a great field to work in. It's always interesting, and you learn all sorts of different things working in the database field. So enjoy your classes, and hopefully you enjoyed this lecture.